This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning into the program. It's Friday, October the 17th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams. He's producing the Come On With It edition of the show. So if you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue and on the air, 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. So it's been a long week, and big thanks to all the contributors to the program. So up again late last night watching the Blue Jays. Remarkable turnaround. 8-2 victory to not to see the series at 2 games apiece. Game 5 goes tonight. Thankfully, it's not late. It's about 7:38 first pitch Island time. You know, I was cautiously hopeful and optimistic going into last night that 41-year-old veteran Max Scherzer would have his stuff. Last night, at the age of 41, 18 years in the big leagues, it was his 31st postseason start and his 500th start as a big leaguer. And he looked great. Amazing stuff. And, of course, it was pretty entertaining when manager John Schneider comes out to take him out of the ball game and Max wasn't having it. You know, people say that's fun and fiery stuff. Can you imagine if Earl Weaver or Billy Martin or Tommy Lasorda or anyone else came out? They would drop him right there on the mound, take the ball and send him on his way. But anyway, the Jays get it done. Great stuff. Big game tonight. All right, let's talk up a little bit of golf. And Gander native Blair Bursey, who has been trying his level best to make it to the next stage of professional golf, had a standout career at the NCAA. He's involved now with the Corn Ferry Tour qualifying school. The Corn Ferry Tour is the tour just below the PGA Tour. So on moving day, day 3, 4 under 67, put him in the T9 at the Q School, the first stage Q School. He needs to polish it off today to finish no worse than T19 or better to move on to the second stage of Q School, so get him. All right. I love this one. So every now and then, someone's good enough to me to call and talk a little sports. And, you know, we have that conversation about who's the best athlete the province has ever produced. And there's a nice long list that is part of a fun conversation. But one that's always on my list is Darren Colburn from Corner Brook. As a hockey player and as a baseball player. So some good news here. And I like how Acadia introduces this. From Corner Brook street hockey to the ECHL Hall of Fame, Darren Colburn's journey is a story of pure goal-scoring talent and relentless drive. So U Sports is the umbrella association that governs all Canadian university sport. So he's a 2-time U Sports All-Canadian, a standout at Acadia, Canadian national team member, and of course he played at every level and excelled, and now he's entering the Acadia Sports Hall of Fame. Congratulations to my old buddy Darren Colburn. Congratulations to you, DC. Great stuff. All right, let's keep going. So let's get into housing. You know, remarkably, and I guess not surprisingly, it's year over year we talk about very similar issues regarding housing. We've had reports from the Canadian Housing and Mortgage Corporation. We had the Housing Accelerator Fund, which was certainly fueled with billions of dollars. It was cumbersome. It was helpful to some bigger municipalities that had the horsepower to compile all the data to polish off the application forms. And now that's gone away. And here comes Build Canada Homes, the new federal government initiative. We don't know how it's going to work. It hasn't even started working yet. It's actually a newly created Crown Corporation, so maybe, just maybe, more bureaucracy as opposed to action on the ground. Talk about building on federal lands and what have you, which is a good thing. But let's talk about it here in the province. So I know how the Home Builders Association, I know what they mean by this, and this is not intended to be cold, but what was already a real problem with supply, a low stock of supply, has really been further concern given the wildfires in CBN. So the Home Builders Association is speaking out about it on a variety of fronts. Number one, for people who lost their homes in CBN, we've been trying to talk about the insurance-related issues, whether it be post-Fiona or the wildfire season. So we'll get back into the same issues that have been broached countless times. Red tape, you know, municipal regulations, municipal fees, skilled trade shortage, those types of things. But let's get it going. I mean, we all know what the areas of concern are. So, yes, whether it be, targeted immigration for skilled trades workers, even though I'm having a hard time squaring that circle when we know at Trades NL, they talk about some 70% unemployment for their 14,000 members who are skilled trades people. So where are we here? Then they talk about, again, creating this approved contractor list. It's interesting that I read that story this morning, given a call yesterday about an approved contractor who laid an egg when installing a heat pump in this one particular caller's home. So yes, it's a good idea to have an approved contractor list, but it needs to be constantly monitored and updated to make sure that contractors don't rest on their laurels. Well, we're on the approved list, let's just go at it. So what are we actually doing here? The cooperation required between the feds and the province and municipalities is crystal clear. It'd be nice to hear some actual momentum here and get some homes built. Whether it be, density housing, multi-units, modular homes, whatever it's going to take. Hitting the affordability target is going to be tricky. To build new homes in the traditional sense of, single-family detached bungalows or whatever the case may be, if it costs $250 to $300 a square foot, affordability is not going to be hit. So if it's multi-units and some of the tax breaks associated with it, if it's modular homes or tiny homes, because not everybody needs a 14,000 square foot on the main single family detached bungalow. So we can talk about the housing. We're more than happy to have the Home Builders Association here on the show, but in the affordability target, the benchmark that's used right across the country is that you should not be spending any more than 30% of your income on housing. But yet we know that has been very difficult to achieve in the last number of years. But here comes the winter right around the corner. The speed and the efficiency with which we can build modular homes is right there in front of us. So what is the plan? We can't have just modular home companies getting fat off the back of taxpayer dollars, but how do we strike the balance of the need to put a roof over people's heads, what that means for issues like poverty, what it means for issues so far as mental health, what it means for issues so far as homelessness and the associated societal and financial cost. But anyway, housing on top here you want to talk about this morning. And speaking of the wildfires, it would be nice. I hear from residents from the North Shore talking about the struggle with insurance companies and the anxiety associated with wondering when any financial assistance is going to come their way, outside of some of the monies that have already been announced, which does not put a roof back over your head. They're wondering, where are we? And it's a good question, and I wish I had answers for them. Anyway, let's keep going. Also, to that end, it would be nice to have some sort of status update about law enforcement, specifically RCMP investigation into the potential for arson to have started those fires. Because most people in the area think that's exactly what's gone on. I don't know, but it'd be nice to have an update. To that end, yesterday, there was a man charged in Nova Scotia who was held responsible for starting the largest wildfire in Nova Scotia history. He's a young fellow named Dalton Stewart, or he's an adult male named Dalton Stewart, 23 years of age. So he admitted his actions as sparking that the Kingston fire, the Barrington Lake wildfire, pardon me. So it was hugely destructive. The rebuild is going to cost tens of millions of dollars. It cost over $2 million to put the fire out. He's been given a fine, $25,000. He did not spark the fire on purpose. It was not arson. He admits to being drunk with his buddies. They started a tire fire during these tinderbox dry conditions. They tried to put it out, but obviously they didn't. And the end result was the Barrington Lake fire. So, status update on arson investigation here. And for the folks who were arrested for not abiding by the fire ban, what became of them? We talked about $50,000 fines, and if you can't pay it, you're going to the clink. But we really don't know what happened there. But about $25,000 fine for all this devastation wreaked by it. All right, sticking with crime and punishment. For years, the Conservatives have been talking about harsher sentences and, as they use in the sloganeering world, jail, not bail. So we're told, and this was, talked about somewhat during the most recent federal campaign. Apparently, the Prime Minister and the Liberal government are going to table legislation to that end next week, talking about harsher sentencing and make bail much harder to get. Okay. They also promised to hire an additional 1,000 new RCMP officers. Look, when political parties say, well, that was our idea, fair enough. In an effort to keep us all safe, I really don't care whose idea it is anymore. So can we do something about what we see? You know, if you call it catch and release or hug a thug and some of those catchphrases that have been utilised here, but what are we going to do here? So they're going to talk about repeat offenders who've been charged with home invasions, violent car theft, assault, sexual assault, extortion, human trafficking. They're talking about reverse onus on bail. So it won't be that the Crown has to prove as to why you should not be granted bail. Now the onus will also be on those who are charged to prove that they deserve bail. That's also come to pass here in this province with sexual assault, what have you. But let's look at historical context here. You know, for starters, there is a lot of evidence out there about what harsher sentences mean. It's a feel-good. It's that people want that dose of retribution to know that a sentence that maybe would have been 5 years is now 10 years, or whatever the case may be. Fair enough. But does it actually work, and does it curb recidivism? Does it make the public more safe? It's just a question that I'll put out there for your consideration, because there's lots of evidence out there that is very much a mixed bag. Let's look back. In 2011, then Prime Minister Stephen Harper and his Conservative government, they were trying to give judges discretion to hand out consecutive 25-year blocks of parole ineligibility in case where an offender has committed multiple first-degree murders. People applauded it. You know, for some of those cases, and there was cases in the courts at that moment of time, that some of these criminals, these murderers, would not be eligible for parole for 150 years. Then it went to the Supreme Court, and it was ruled unconstitutional. So the Prime Minister says that they've consulted with constitutional experts, police forces, justice ministers across the country to make sure this legislation is viable. But I think it's welcome in many corners when we think about public safety. The public feels less safe. The end. And so whether we talk about root causes of crime, people also want the punishment to be part of the conversation. Hopefully that also includes rehabilitation, because that's sort of the hope on top of punishment, is that you don't come out worse than you went in. But that legislation apparently to be tabled next week. It'd be nice to have a look at it and wonder whether or not the Supreme Court will uphold the plan. Your thoughts? Okay. Anything election reflection we're happy to take on here this morning, because here we come with the PC majority government. And I get it. There's a transition time, and they need to get a cabinet appointed, need to be sworn in, and there will be people clamoring for immediate action, because time is of the essence. We know it to be true. You know, I'm going to make every effort to be fair in understanding that no one's going to flip a switch and all of a sudden all the issues facing the people of the province are going to be solved, because they're not. But promises made are going to be latched onto by various sectors of the public and looking for answers and some action on promises. It's just nature of the beast. It's how we all operate, right? And that includes the Registered Nurses Union. Lots of big pledges about healthcare, and in particular the registered nurses of the province. So yes, adding 50 additional seats to the nursing school, that makes sense to me. But it only makes sense if and when they're all offered a job, and a permanent full-time job. Even though that comes with a benefits cost, so be it. Then it's expanding the locum program beyond simply Labrador and the Great Northern Peninsula. That also makes a lot of sense. Then they want the establishment of an independent health sector safety council. This one is interesting because it's not necessarily about operational nursing, but we already have these councils established for manufacturing, fishing, forestry, construction. Yvette Coffey and the union says, look, this is about violence and addressing workplace violence. And here's a quote coming from Ms. Coffey. That's what we want for healthcare. We have the highest rates of violence. We have the highest rates of injury. This is sort of a stroke of a pen to create this standalone health sector safety council, because we hear the stories. And it's unbelievable. When you add the traumatic workload that nurses experience and many other healthcare professionals experience day in and day out, the extraordinarily long days many of the nurses put in, to know that the rate of violence and the rate of injury is what it is, there's no reason why that we can't establish this health sector safety council. But there's a lot of promises been made, and I get it. It's part of campaigning. Then it's the travel nurses. We've all been infuriated with the amount of money going out the door. Since 2022, around $240 million. What would be also very nice is to have some real strategy about how we reduce reliance on travel nurses. In addition to that, what's going on with the Auditor General's report that looked at ineligible expenses and the possibility of fraud? What happened to that? I mean, fraud is a criminal. is a criminal charge. So it looked pretty clear that there were some fraudulent invoices coming in the door. So where are we on that front? All right, this one, I don't know if you're interested in taking it on, but the public have been offered tours of the new ambulatory healthcare hub. That's, of course, the old Costco building on Stavanger. Tours take place this Sunday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., starting every half hour. It's a welcome new facility, a variety of clinics and services, general medicine, internal medicine, general surgery, joint assessments, eye clinic, plastic surgery, outpatient, x-ray, audiology, orthopedics, all good. The one thing people, I think, still rightfully point to is if we always knew this was going to be a needed facility, an ambulatory healthcare facility, Costco building was for sale for quite a long time before a private sector company bought it. And then what did we do? We leased it from them. Was there not cost savings with buying it? Even if we weren't fully prepared with staffing and to go into the construction phase for renovations to make it conducive for ambulatory healthcare, will never understand how the government didn't buy that building. If it was ever going to use it into the future, I think the same thing could be said, or a very similar conversation regarding the Comfort Inn. The government never even considered buying it when establishing the transitional home that it is intended to be. We leased it at extraordinary cost. Now it's been sold, and we don't really know what end of lease looks like. So, if we've got the foresight to look down the road about what we're going to need with transitional homes or this healthcare or this ambulatory health clinic, boy, those things were for sale. Well, at least the Costco building was for sale. But if you're interested in the public tour, it happens this Sunday every half hour from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Also, just popped my mind about the Auditor General. I wonder, is there a plan with the incoming government to address the Auditor General's report on personal care homes? It's important. They identified all sorts of big problems inside the system, and not every personal care home is a problem. Not every personal care home employee is a problem, but some are. So whether it be the inappropriate administration of medicine, all levels of abuse, operational standards that have not been updated since 2007, identifying non-compliance, make public disclosures, and the roadmap for settling the non-compliance issues, which can be fairly innocuous all the way to extremely severe. So I'd like to hear a little bit from the PCs about, because they latched onto it, rightfully so, when the Auditor General released what we always refer to as a scathing report. But where are we there? A couple of last ones. So we know the Canada Post strike had an implication regarding the most recent election here, provincial election. Voter cards not sent out. Same thing municipally. People had an issue with mail-in ballots because of the obvious. Is it time for us to say that election material like voter cards should be deemed essential mail? The same thing we did with things like social assistance checks and what have you. Maybe even include GST checks there. But election-related stuff, and not just all the flyers and the placards and stuff, but things like voter registration cards, should we deem that essential? I think we should. I mean, we are talking about one of the bedrocks of democracy is the need and the right to vote, but also to be informed about your vote and to make it efficient at the polling stations on election day. So I'm interested in what you think there. And of course, more than happy to talk the Upper Churchill Memorandum of Understanding, like what's next? It's in some part galling that there's going to be an independent review, which I have no problem with, but let's just think about it out loud. Had we put that in the hands, this complex $500 billion worth of mega projects into the hands of whoever for an independent review, had it happen in March and you give the company 6 months, we'd be in a much different situation here in talking about this complicated yet ultra important issue. We still had time back in March, and now time is not what it once was. So your thoughts on it, including the referendum, which would be binding, so says Mr. Wakeham, the Premier Designate. So yeah. Last one. This is a bit more personal, but it's also, I think, has implications across the board. We can talk about cell phone coverage as public safety and as a matter of frustration. But in the world of TV, remember back when, they kind of flew under the radar, and all of a sudden there was one primary TV receiver that was a freebie. The rest getting charged $8 a month, even though people didn't realize it. So I got an issue with my bloody TV. Yesterday I called my provider to go through all the rigmarole of unplug this and hold that down and do this and go to the modem and, dance a jig for an hour. We fixed it. 2 hours later, gone again. I get back on the phone, 90 minutes later, I'm told, well, your receiver doesn't work, we'll send you a new one. To which I said, can you send me a technician? Because this is the second time in 3 months I've gone down this particular frustrating hole with the telecom provider. So they say no. But basically, when I thought about it out loud, hey, wait now. I'm doing unpaid work here. I'm the technician. You know, that's the second time in 3 months. Plus, it was 2.5 hours yesterday, which I'll never get back, where I was the technician. Hold on here. It used to be not that long ago. You had repeated problems like that. What would they say? We'll send you a technician. Now, no, put on your technician hat. By the way, do you have a tool belt handy? Are you ready to go up and down over the stairs to deal with the modem 10 times in the next 90 minutes? It was a good workout, but all of a sudden, I'm the technician? What? We're on Twitter, or VOCM Open Line. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show to wrap up the week. That happens if you're in the queue to talk about whatever's on your mind, like Roy, who wants to talk about the MOU. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Good morning, Roy. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you this morning?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
I'm doing wonderful, Patty, and thank you very much for taking my call.
No problem.
I've listened to your radio show for a long time now, and not a regular listener, but when I can, I certainly do. I'm working in the north, and I admire your sense of information on the MOU. It's a complex document. It's a very complex phenomena, and you've got a lot of information. You've processed it neatly. I don't have a lot of information, but I got a perspective, an attitude, an opinion, and that's the reason why I called. I'm not calling to share earth-breaking news, but just a perspective. MOU for me, when I look at it, I believe the boat was missed on the MOU in March, April. And I think the boat was missed beginning with the outgoing Premier Fury's resignation. I believe it was wrong, certainly, for him to have resigned with a document with an opportunity for up to $250 billion on the table, that he landed on the table, and he was probably one of the architects behind the document. I believe that in April, if the Liberal Party had to have just got their thoughts collected and in a unified forum said, look, in each district in this province and in Labrador, we had a public forum hosted by each MHA. Nobody else, because they're getting paid. MHAs are getting paid to do this. I don't want to listen to somebody else who's not getting paid, got no accountability, no responsibility. I think they had a couple of months there to put a presentation together, to put an understanding together, to put a unified program together, and then to share it with the MHAs and say, look, take this to your district and have a public meeting at your high school, in your community center, somewhere in the district, and allow people to understand what we've got understood and share it with them. And then when you share it with the fine people that elected you, give them the opportunity to ask you questions, because we may have missed the mountain. We may have missed some targets. So allow them to ask questions and to voice concerns. And that's a part of the heat of being an MHA. And so in a unified fashion, they take back from the district the responses of the district, reassemble, put together their thoughts, because they got just as good of ideas as any politician in Canada. And in a respectable fashion, go back and say, this is what we did. This is what we have. And this is what we would want you to vote on. We're going to have a referendum now. And now when you have a referendum, you're informed. Your voice is there. And you have a say. The referendum will be held on this MOU. And now you've got an opportunity to vote on something with a sense of knowing and knowledge. And not a sense of ignorance. You can ask any MHA in this province, any person in the community, what is the MOU? And there's nothing but a perplexed confusion in their response. So someone missed the vote.
Yeah. To that end, Roy, look, I completely understand where you're coming from, but let's just take it one step further.
The MOU. The brakes should be put on the and this is my last thought.
Okay.
The brakes should be put on the MOU. until such a process is done. And then, we've got a trade corridor that Prime Minister Carney says he's developing. Gull Island may be just as accessible for investment and interest to Ontario or to a consortium of PEI, New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, or to Alberta as it is to Quebec. So there are many players in this picture if you develop it and you go about it right. My contention is that part of the Liberal Party in this election is that they never went about it right. Their management and their strategy from the back room was totally weak. That's it.
Yeah, they may have displayed some overconfidence with the MOU. I mean, they hung their hat on it as being the real key issue in this election, which I guess I understand why they did that, but I think they underestimated the confusion and or the concern amongst the electorate. To your MHA suggestion, look, very early on here, there was 2 full days of sworn evidence being offered in the House of Assembly. People who were being asked questions of were peppered by, 10, 12 senior lawyers. So there was actually a pretty helpful exercise in the House of Assembly during that time. I'm not so sure how many people watched it or listened to it or read their Hansard transcript of it. But the MHA is taking the show on the road. We could put them in their hand a flicker that presented a deck of slides, but would they, to a man, to a woman, be able to answer questions? That would be my only concern, is if you have really in-tune people that attend that town hall and have an engineering question or a value question or a price question or a term question, I wonder how many of the MHAs would be actually equipped to answer that in any real accurate form. So I understand your point. They needed to take it a bit more to the people, but we need people to take it who probably know a bit more about it. And then I'm not trying to be disrespectful of the MHAs, because some of them probably spent copious amounts of time poring over the MOU and asking questions of experts or people in their social circles. But I bet you most of the MHAs probably couldn't do much more than hit the flicker and move from slide to slide.
Well, I don't know. I'm not going to underestimate the capacity of the MHAs. I don't want to do that, because I know there's a lot of great people. And then if I underestimated the capacity of the MHAs, I'm missing the target. The real target is in putting together a good program in the back room with a group of people and arriving at a consensus that this is not for a NASA team, this is not for an Apple team or Google. This is for our population, our people who live in the towns, in the villages around the bay, our general people, and give them the courtesy and the respect. And listen, make your MHA accountable. If he has a confusion or she has an understanding issue with the document, with the host of slides, well, then correct it. Get it going, because we don't hold them to account. And that's been part of the issue, the lack of accountability. And then again, encircling this whole idea is that of trust. I'll go back to something you said about, I believe earlier, maybe Premier Fury say, when he left office immediately after bringing in the possibility of the MOU with Quebec, I believe that whole value of trust was what was turned over, because he left too quick. And people get suspicious. People get really disheartened, and all of a sudden you got a bad color. There were some, I think, misplays in the whole thing. A lot of great people ran, and a lot of great people ran for good reason. But I don't think, in honesty, I don't think the PC really won the election as much as the Liberals lost the election by just terrible management, terrible strategy, and terrible entitlement and arrogance. And that's all I wanted to say to this point. Put the brakes on the MOU. Stop it in its tracks. develop an awareness and an understanding in the villages that elect the MHAs. Get them out there, get them on the same page. If you can't get your MHAs on the same page, holy God, what does that say?
Volumes. Roy, appreciate making time for the show. Thanks for doing it.
Have a great day, Paddy, and thank you for accepting the call.
Pleasure. Have a nice weekend.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye. All right, let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, I'm sure you're in the queue to talk about, well, whatever's on your mind. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go. Line number 1. Good morning, Peter. You're on the air.
Yeah, good morning, Paddy. I kind of laughed when I heard your story about the technician. Well, I've since graduated with that program, and I'm only kidding when I say that, but like you, I ran around with a tool belt up and down stairs. I got my exercise, thank you. But the lessons I learned from that were, one, the receivers they say that they're going to send you are new. No, they're refurbished. So you have to actually ask that you send them, provide you with a new receiver, because they only take them back and, of course, update them and put them back on the market, which I think is, well, it's up to the consumer, I suppose, to acknowledge that one. But the other thing I tend to look for is when they do send a technician, is that he is an official employee of, say, Bell or Rogers versus having a contractor. With all due respect to the contractors, it's hit and miss with those chaps. And lastly, the other thing I found was they update a lot of times their equipment, but like many people, we pay it each month, and we don't know that there's a better unit out there that they can provide you with. And unless you ask, of course, they're going to try to charge you. But I always say, if you want my business, I want the upgrades. Thank you.
All excellent points. Just one by one. The technician that gets sent in, I agree with you, because a technician who works directly for one of the big three providers, say, well, I guess in this case Rogers or Bell if we're talking about TV, they've got more skin in the game, as does the company, because that person has a Bell or a Rogers logo on their shirt or on their jacket or what have you, versus a contractor that's simply contracted to represent Bell but doesn't work for Bell. So that's a good point. With the new receiver business, you are 100% right. 3 months ago, when I had to go down the same path, this infuriating road, I got a new receiver in the mail. Of course, it's wrapped in plastic. I open it up, and on the bottom of it is a scratch. And I'm thinking, this isn't new. This is a refurbished receiver. This is going to be a problem. And 3 months later, of course, that receiver crapped out. So excellent points being made, and good buyer beware stuff.
Well, it's unfortunate, but they still charge you the same price for refurbishment? I don't think so. As consumers, and we all know we're paying probably some of the highest for our TV services and providers. But at the end of the day, and people don't have time, let's be honest. But, you got to stay on top of these guys. If you're paying $100 and something a month, then, take the time, or if you're in your neighbor's house, just have a gander at their equipment and see if they have who their provider is and what the equipment looks like, for 2 seconds. It might save you a lot of grief.
Yeah, and check your bill. Like, we took a receiver out of our house when the boys moved out, because that particular TV, my wife and I can't remember the last time I even looked at it. So we took the receiver out to save a few bucks. But then looking at the bill a few months later to find out that they continued to charge us that $8 per month. Now, it's not going to break the bank, but it's frustrating. So when I called customer care, they could see on their screen the date with which I returned that receiver, which was well before my billing date, and yet consequently, they kept billing me for it until I looked at it a few months later and thought, what? How come I'm still paying for this particular receiver that Bell has it back? They've now refurbished it and sent it off to some other unbeknownst customer. So all good and important points, Peter.
Okay, well, hopefully it's food for thought. But the last thing, and it's no reflection on anyone, is you're lucky if you get a person on the phone who you can understand. And sometimes I get them from all over the world, and their English is great. And other times it's not as good, and then that becomes frustrating to you because it's like, do I have to go through this process again? So, if they're going to hire people, at least hire Canadians in Canada. I don't care where they're from, anywhere, but at least keep it in Canada and save our jobs. Anyway, that's the last point I'd like to make.
And I'm glad you made it, Peter. I appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right.
Bye.
To that end, that last comment from Peter, let's just pick up on that for a second. Now, I think what's happened here is many people, whether it be you're calling a customer care center or technical support or whatever, and you're speaking with someone who you think is probably not living in the country, and the accent might be a little bit, presents a bit of a language barrier. What we do is we get mad at newcomers, and we don't get mad at the corporations who were 100% and solely responsible for taking those jobs offshore. So isn't that kind of a curious way that our minds work here? We'll get mad at someone who looks like the person that you heard on the other end of the phone while you were dealing with a frustrating whatever issue with your internet or with whatever. But the companies get off scot-free here. They've done it. They've moved the jobs elsewhere, and it was just about money. It wasn't about efficiency. It wasn't about productivity. It wasn't about customer service. It was about money. And yet we get mad at the individual. And as to say you see them in the grocery store the day after you had that 2.5 hour experience on the phone with someone who probably wasn't in the country. But we get mad at that person. And the corporations, we just get mad at them about our bill or no technician. They move the jobs offshore. It's similar to when you see some of the things going on down south about the ice thugs and the raids and what have you. It's just got that unintended consequence for how it hangs over about how people think and how they view other people. Right? It's an amazing world. Yeah, and I mean, like with all the undocumented workers that are being rounded up, shipped off to countries that they're not even from, how come we never hear about the owners of the companies that are employing undocumented workers? Again, they get off scot-free. They're not even part of the news. We'll see the video and the reels of the, no due process deportation of somebody. But the folks hiring and knowing full well who they hired, even if it was in an effort to save some money or to hire someone to take a job that someone else wouldn't, we never hold them to account. We just don't do it. We don't do it at all. We all just flick our eyes around and finger points of blame at the individuals, most of which are just trying to make ends meet. And the corporations taking the jobs offshore or parking their money offshore, high wealth individuals and corporate, we just kind of let them away with it. No one really says much about it. Let's go ahead and take a break. Still tons of time left for you, obviously. The topic entirely up to you. It doesn't have to be the big things because it never surprised. At the beginning of my tenure here, it used to kind of shock me about some of the issues that got a lot of attention and a lot of feedback. Of course, the big ones do. But you know what led the league yesterday in reaction that I got? A call from Alex about feeding squirrels. Truly amazing. All the way from don't feed wildlife, all the way to suggestions and some pitfalls that you have to consider and all the rest of it. So I don't know, a few dozen emails about feeding squirrels overnight. Remarkable. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. I get emails like this every now and then. It'll start off with setting me up and say, hey, Patty, I love the show. Okay, thanks. And yes, thank you. But it goes on to say, sometimes I feel like you bring up certain subjects just to provoke, or I'm not going to use the words that this person used, but yeah, sometimes that's kind of like part of the job. But then the insinuation was exaggeration of the importance of one issue, and this one was about personal care homes. No, it's not an exaggeration. The Auditor General's report from April was pretty important. I mean, they talked about feces being smeared on walls, residents that have simply gone missing, inappropriate administration of medication, and as a result, one person is dead. Repeatedly given the wrong medicine that was meant for another resident. Consequently, someone died. I don't know how that is purposely being exaggerated. It seems pretty important to me. The AG looked at a 3-month window, and in that 3-month window, there was 41 medication incidents, whether it be missing drugs, needle left on an insulin pen, and of course, they're meant to be single use. Then they talked about verbal abuse, concerns of sexual abuse. So I'm not so sure sure that constitutes an exaggeration for the sake of. I mean, we're talking about 6,000 plus residents of personal care homes, and of course that's 6,000 plus residents and their family and friends. So that's an awful lot of people would be part of this. And then issues regarding compliance are also pretty important. You know, there was a concern about the distancing between the department and NL Health Services, and sort of maybe the disconnect or the lack of communication between the two regarding the operations at personal care homes. And the fact of the matter is, Denise Hanrahan, not to put words in her mouth, but she was looking for accountability on things like some $83 million spent in one fiscal year, 23-24, and it rose from about double from previous years. And yet still finding some of these issues that are part of some personal care homes. So maybe sometimes I throw it out just to instigate a call. Of course, what else am I supposed to do? But I'm not exaggerating the personal care homes. The Auditor General and her team did pretty good work on this front, and their findings were concerning, to say the very least. So let's keep going. Let's go to line number one. Gerald, you're on the air.
Is that me?
That's you.
Morning, Paddy.
Morning.
I know if you talked with the other man had his perspective. You know, your previous caller, I got one now. I'm just some sick old man. But we seem to be we seem to be spending a lot of time talking about Quebec's problem.
It's an interesting way to put it.
I'm praising it in terms this MOU with power. We don't need Muskrat power, not Muskrat, Churchill Falls power here in Newfoundland. We can live without it. It's not something we have. If we close down Churchill Falls today, we say we still have power. This is Quebec's problem, and we are dealing with it. You see my perspective? I
think that's partially true.
They made what they did years ago. They went and built a power plant in Newfoundland. That's what they did, and they profited handsomely from it. Now the options have run out. They got a problem, not us.
I don't disagree with the overall sentiment. We do indeed still have a need for power from Churchill, but we're not talking, copious amounts of immediate energy, but like even expanding opportunities in Lab West. And of course,
why do we need Paddy from here in the island?
I just specifically said Labrador West.
Oh, Lab West, oh yeah. Well, I presume they won't shut down the plant. They'll keep operating it to supply their customers. If we said, look, we're shutting down the plant, just your problem. You need electricity if you want to. You see, Paddy, what I'm saying, the perspective is all wrong. They're coming to us and giving us terms. We own that project. We'll set the terms. We're the seller. If I'm selling my house, I don't ask someone else how much they're going to charge for it. Or if they come to us, look. The old saying, beware Greeks bearing gifts. And that's what Savia and that crowd came down here, and they traced our gullible politicians here to fall for that ruse. You see my point?
I do.
Quebec, sort of, and I'm going to expand on that quite a bit. I do want to lie in the wake and see how stupid we are. And I say how stupid our governments are. Listen, the government you're asking to deal with, they're the same crowd that got us in the mess we're in now. We're $50 billion in the hole. We got an electrical project up there that's not accounted for, and we're trusting these same people to say, to give us counsel, and like Nalcor, this woman from Nalcor, and Nalcor. Look, I wouldn't give them anything to do after what they did. They colluded to get that project up there in Labrador. And now, what we're doing in essence, Paddy, we're taking this rate mitigation business, and we're taking the squandering and the stupidity we've done and pass it on to our children. That's what rate mitigation does. Let them pay for it. We made a mistake. Too bad. We live happily on. It's just terrible. And you could expand the same thing with the debt we have here. Now we got $50 billion in debt, and they say, look, we'll just leave. These are deferred taxes. Give it to our children. We're not manning up to our debt. What we've done, squandered all this money, built all this great big government we got. That's the real problem we have here. We got a government that's sucking up every bloody dollar that's around in their bloated size, their bloated, their public service, the public service units, etc. That's the problem. We won't deal with it.
There's a lot to that.
Yes, so anyway, Paddy, I'm a sick old man, and I've gone. I lived in commissioner government, and I can tell you now, that's other than the early Joey Smallwood, that's the best government we had here in this island. They governed best, and they governed least. We got a government here now, all us in Newfoundland, that's bloated. Also, you can do your own adjectives. If you got eyes to see what's going on. And that showed up, by the way, in the election. We're all Newfoundland, the rural Newfoundland finally caught on to what's going on here. All that money is poured into the governments here, and they've expanded their size. The numbers are there. That's what I see, you know, as my opinion. But it's there to see. You look at their budget. Look how it's increased. Look how their employees increased. That's the problem we got. So I say to my fellow Newfoundlanders, that's our problem. Either we deal with it like adults, or we become the infantilized people that we become. So like I say, Paddy, I'm a sick old man, but I just have to say this.
Well, you're making a lot of good points for a sick old man. So when I think about it, I've been at this for about 20 years. When I first started in the media, the provincial budget was around $3 billion. Now it's around $11 billion. The population has only grown by maybe, net growth of 20,000, because when I first started, we had about 520,000 people living in the province. Then we saw a bit of an exodus. Now we've seen the population grow to about 540, but the billion from 3 to 11, with the population only net growth 20, the number of people working for the public sector from X to X times 3, the number of people making in excess of $100,000 has grown wildly, even over the course of the last 10 years. So there's a lot of good points as to what you're making here this morning.
Yes, Billy. And look, you're an important voice here in the public. And I ask you, don't lose sight of that. Whenever you ask any politician, or when NAPE comes on, or the teachers' unions are on, just remember, and as I said, show it up in the vote. There's a strange thing that all St. John's voted Liberal. All rural Newfoundland went the other way. There's a reason for that, and one is the reason all the money that's poured into the Northeast in the last, all the oil money. Look around, the new buildings we got. Look, the police have they even got what do you call them, SWAT teams. They're going around now with that SWAT team, looking for an incident in the city. They send down a SWAT team. Geez, look, they're a hammer looking for a nail. Anyway, I don't want to divert. I'm just saying that it's strange that the way the election went to this, and hopefully rural Newfoundland will catch on to what's going on here.
And it used to be the exact opposite. It used to be the Tories flourished in the Northeast Avalon, and the Liberals did great outside the overpass, and now we've kind of flip-flopped that. It's fascinating that you mentioned oil, because, unless you work directly in the oil industry, or even indirectly to profit yourself, for the vast majority of us, I know it means money for the provincial government, but when oil developments happen, for the normal Joe and Jane, like myself and the wife and others, is all that we really saw is more expensive stuff, like housing. All of a sudden, the house that was $100,000 is $150,000 because they made an announcement that they're moving ahead with Hebron or White West Rose or whatever the case may be. So, it's interesting you brought that up.
Yeah, I could go on a bit more, but I don't want to forget my point. But Penny, all in all, we'd be just as well off if we never discovered that oil. And in many ways, the discovery of oil in the areas pretty well wrecks the area that is found. It distorts the economy, brings drugs and all kinds of trouble. We'd be better off if we never had it, and concentrated on our fishery, and concentrated on to get our government out of the way of what we can do here in Newfoundland. If I was a farmer, I wanted to start farming, my biggest obstacle would be Department of Agriculture, but whatever they call it. trying to stop me doing procurement. Stop any business you undertake. There's a bunch of bureaucrats around finding some way to interfere, stop you, and make a living. You see it over and over and over. You hear people phoning in all the time. I want to do this and I want to do that, and I've got this permit, and so on and so on. The same with the Department of Fisheries, really, on the federal level.
Yeah, no, there's no argument there on fisheries and agriculture.
I can't go down and catch a fish to eat, but no one can give you a reason. Anyway, I can go on and on. You see my point,
I do, Gerald. I'm glad you called. Thanks a lot.
Okay, then.
Take good care. Bye-bye. That was a good call, interesting call. Just one quick point on big industry like oil and drugs. Because he said, that kind of wealth brings upon some of those societal ills like drugs. Try to take this how it's intended. Like places like Fort McMurray, the way that the industry has that issue regarding drugs, and of course they do, people are working in a dangerous work environment. But you could get fired for smoking a marijuana cigarette on Friday night to go back to work on Monday, but the cocaine is out of your system by the time you go back to work Monday. So what do you think people did? They had the money. They knew they'd get in trouble for marijuana. They knew they couldn't detect the cocaine. So all of a sudden they have a cocaine problem. When if you did cocaine Friday night, went back to work on Monday morning, you're probably in worse shape than if you smoked a joint on Friday night. So what do we think was going to happen? People latched onto the drugs that exited your system quicker than the cannabis. And so what happened then? Serious drug addictions, serious issues, serious crime that comes with, of course, cocaine trade and the like. Let's take a break for the news. Talk away. Welcome back to the show. Let's begin this hour on line number 1. Good morning, Sarah. You're on the air.
Hi, Patty.
Hi.
I heard the call with Janine yesterday regarding student assistance.
Uh-huh.
And I'm having similar issues out here on Random Island as well. Between last school year and this school year, we went from 5 student assistants down to 2. The school recently got a third back. One is unfulfilled. They're trying to get an applicant, but it's a temporary position. And there was also a change in policy this year where a student assistant must be paired with a teaching staff when they're working with a child, which makes sense for accountability and safety and everything. But for my child, that means that she's often with an IRT and a student assistant to herself because she can't be in the regular classroom because it's just too noisy and crowded and everything for her. And so now you've got 2 IRTs. They only have 2 IRTs for over 10 kids, plus her, she's got high support needs autism. And they're stretched very, very thin trying to support her and support the rest of the kids, and they can't get a third IRT put in place. They've requested it, and they've been denied. So as a result, many times this year, I've gotten calls for her to come home because of challenging behaviors that would normally be manageable at school, but I've been told, we just don't have the staff to deal with her, and she has to come home. And a lot of that has to do with, she, is very, how can I explain it? She has a lot of sensory needs, and she gets overwhelmed by chatter and things like that. So when an IRT is trying to work with another student in the room with her, she'll often have behavioral challenges because she don't exactly like the presence of other kids in with her at the time. There are times where she just needs to be separated, but because of that new policy, that can't happen without a teaching staff. But the rest of the teachers are in their main classrooms with crowds of kids, and then she ends up kind of absorbing the support of one of the 2 IRTs. And one of the 2 student assistants to herself, and the other kids aren't able to get their support.
it ripples through the entire classroom. And I mean, we've heard the incoming government talk about it, the outgoing Liberals talking about, $40 million to hire 400 new people into the system. My question would be, where are the people? I mean, we can put forward the money, but where are the actual itinerant teachers or student assistants or anything else?
Yeah, that's another issue. And where we are, I know they've had trouble even getting subs in when the student assistants have been out. There's been a couple of times I've had to drive her to school, which I don't mind doing. But we're, a good the school is like about 30 minutes from Clarenville, and most people that are coming for these positions, that's where they're from there and beyond, right? So it's hard to get substitutes. It's hard to, I guess, attract people to this area, right? That's another challenge. And yeah, so that's what we've been dealing with, and it's going to continue throughout the whole school year because we can't get this third IRT, which would relieve a lot of the extra strain. And then we're still short student assistants. They were only just barely getting by with what they had, and then it was cut. So everybody's stretched so thin. I have a family member that's working there now in the school, and he's had to fill in for student assistants and stuff like that. Like everybody's stretched trying to manage all of these children that need support at the same time. And like I said, my daughter she's the only really high support needs child in the school, and she, through no fault of her own, ends up absorbing the little resources that are there, right? So it's causing a lot of issues, and I've reached out to my MHA's office. Our MHA is Louis Parrott, and the Liberal candidate, Greg French, he also reached out and was going to touch base with the education minister for us. And I was also talking to the director of schools, Melanie Perry, but there's really no immediate solution.
Yeah, and here we are, and it's the middle of October, and we have these conversations all the time. Going back to school and the district and the department know which children need additional supports, additional challenges, and yet how often do we hear the story that my child can't go back to school because the support that he or she needs is simply not there. And yet we know that child was in grade 4, is the same person, and had required supports last year, is moving on to grade 5, and they go back to school to find out that they're not there, even though the family has interacted with the vice principal and the principal in August, making sure that their kid is going to get the help they need, and it's not there. It's, and I don't even know where to point the finger of blame here, because I don't imagine it's as easy as saying, well, we're going to hire 400 more people to work in the system, not even knowing if there's 400 people out there who are actually trained to do what we need them to do. So I think it just snowballed. It became, when we just said that we're going to have an inclusive education model, which consequently just meant that everybody, regardless of the challenge, goes to the same school. But unless everyone gets whatever support they need, then we're just failing everybody in the school system. We are. If I have a child who's mobility issue or somewhere on the profound end of the spectrum or has a behavioral issue and they don't have their support worker they need in classroom, every single student feels it. Every single teacher feels it. So the inclusive model, and I hate to say it out loud, but I think it's true, it doesn't work. The way it's currently structured, it simply does not work.
No, it really doesn't. And my daughter, like I said, she's got, some very challenging needs. And we're in this rural area. And, in my mind, she almost needs an IRT to herself. They've said it too. She almost needs an IRT to herself to be successful in school. And without that, we're just doing this day after day. I expect a call, and every just about every day I expect a call, because as soon as she has some challenging behaviors, they don't know what else to do. They have other kids to try to help, and here she is, right? So I would be open to the discussion if it ever came around to the idea of maybe in these situations, maybe there could be some kind of program where a parent could be paid to homeschool their child in this kind of situation, or some kind of maybe sending them to a bigger school where there's more resources or something like that. Like right now, it's, if the school calls and she gets sent home, I have childcare issues. And I miss work. Last year I missed a lot of work trying to do this. And I rely on some help from my mom and also from my respite care worker. So I use a lot of respite care hours just for this kind of situation. And there's no end in sight. There's no solution. But I understand. I fully accept that. This is I can't be the only one. Geographically, I'm in a rural area with the only really high support needs child in the area who attends school. And maybe it's time to discuss more options for parents that, like, if they're not actually going to put the supports in place, give us some more options.
Yeah, I mean, and that's fair enough. And I'd also put out there, I don't even know how many parents can actually take on that additional responsibility. Maybe some would want to simply out of love and affection for their child, but deep down inside thinking, man, oh man, I really don't know if I've got that in me to do day in, day out, 24/7, when we were told by successive governments that the school system would accommodate. So it's a failure, and it really is. And in some forms, it might be an actual betrayal. And I'm not pretending that I have all the answers, but boy, someone who's been hired or elected to do exactly that, it's about time they come forward with some of these answers.
Yeah, like really, I look at it as her human right to be in school is right now being violated because that support is not there that she logically needs to be in school. It's like her behavioral challenges and sensory needs are a part of her disability. She can't help it, a lot of it, and she needs this separate person to support her. One-on-one. Or, well, really two-on-one, because she has a student assistant and IRT with her all the time, usually.
I completely understand, Sarah. I appreciate you making time for the program. Anything else you'd like to say?
No, I'm I really hope they would come up with some kind of solution for this. To do this all school year, it's going to be a big, big challenge for us.
No doubt about it. I appreciate your time, Sarah. Thank you for the call.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Yeah, I mean, we can admit it. It doesn't make you a bad person. The inclusive model of education conceptually sounds like exactly the right thing to do. To isolate people with different challenges or needs and not be part of the general school population feels very cold and callous, which is why inclusive sounds good. But sounding good and being good are two different things. Let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about doctors and whatever the case may be. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Good morning, Sean. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. I've got some notes made here, so I don't get all tangled up. But I spoke to you about 2 years ago. But first, let me say I want to throw you a bouquet for your valuable advice, your empathetic views, and your humanity. You're so important to society, giving people an opportunity to present their views. And I just want to thank you for that.
I appreciate it. It's more of the show than me, but thanks for that.
Yeah, I want to say, when I spoke to you 2 years ago, I spoke to you from a crack house. And I asked you advice for someone that lived there. And I just wanted to speak about where I've been to. I was involved with drugs. First of all, I worked my 35 years. I retired. When I retired, I got entangled with the wrong type of people. Now, I was lucky enough that my kids were raised. I had boats and trailers and bikes and trucks and everything you could want. I lost it all of it. I had nothing but the clothes on my back because of cocaine. And Prime Minister Carney just is going to enact some new laws about violent offenders and repeat offenders. I think that one of the things that he should look at is to the people that, not the users of the drug, but the distributors and the ones who sell it. their penalties are so slight. And I'll give you a little example, is that I know of one instance right now today of a person who was convicted of selling cocaine, and he destroyed so many lives you wouldn't believe. And he served some time in prison. And when he got out, he went right back to the same thing he did before. And I only heard about yesterday or a day or so ago that he beat the girl that he was with, which is no doubt a drug addict, because that's who they are. They get these people to come in during their lives, and they've got the drug, the thing that they want. So they'll abuse them, use them, whatever they need from them. So they'll get their money for one, and they'll get their services for two. And I think that Prime Minister Carney should have that in there, that anyone who's convicted of selling that drug, and there's more than just coke, there's the meth and all the other stuff, they are playing with people's lives. When I started this, knew a bunch of people, and I cannot count now, and both my hands, how many deaths have been, people's lives have been taken away because of that drug. Now, when I got out of this drug abuse, when I was in there, I used the excuse that my family, I'm better off away from them, because like this, I'm no good to anybody. So I continued at the drugs, and when I decided to leave the drug world, I left, and I was diagnosed 2 months later with stage 4 cancer. And that started another whole bunch of events. But I have to say, too, that the doctors, Dr. Rourke, Dr. Badcock, Dr. Edwards at the Health Science are absolute angels. They've kept me alive. 2 years ago, they gave me 6 months to a year. That's over 2 years ago. Not only I'm not going to recover at stage 4, but not only has my life improved back to where I was almost to before all this started, I've taken, not me, but my girlfriend has followed me in the same path. And drugs are now, the door and that is closed behind us. And I just feel that the penalty should be increased, because these people are taking people's lives. And if they don't take their life, they're actually still taking it, because any part of society that they were, helpful in is completely gone.
Yeah, quick comment. Just recently there's been somebody charged with selling a pill that was supposed to be Xanax to a 14-year-old kid, and of course it wasn't Xanax, and it dropped the kid dead. That dealer's being charged, and rightfully so. It's one thing to charge cocaine dealers or meth dealers or fentanyl dealers with whatever level of crime, but when the drug is being misrepresented, if you've got cocaine that's laced with fentanyl and people don't know and it drops them dead, that's a crime beyond just trafficking. Same thing with that pill that was Xanax that killed that little 14-year-old boy. Until we change the way we approach these Schedule A drugs or these illicit toxic drugs, we're just going to see the problems just grow. I mean, the overdose crisis in this country is out of control. Now, we don't feel it quite as distinctly as they do, for instance, in British Columbia, but like everything else, it moves from west to east, and before we know it, we'll be in the same throes of overdose deaths here that they are there on a per capita basis. So, I'm really curious to find out what happens in that one trial where that dealer is charged in the death of that little boy or that teenage boy.
I think that should be broadened right across, because if their lives are not like that young man, that young boy, he died needlessly. And the cocaine now is so pure that maybe it doesn't even need to be mixed with fentanyl to kill you. And like you said earlier, you could go to work and you smoke marijuana and you get tested and you get caught, but you can do cocaine and go back to work after the weekend and you're okay.
Yeah, we created a problem in some of these industrial communities. I use Fort McMurray as an example because I know people who have lived there, and they say the same thing. You know, the way the companies have the right for the random drug test, but if the workers know that the cocaine's out of my system before I go back on my rotation versus the weed is still in my system, and they want to use drugs, what do you think they're going to do? They don't want to jeopardize their job, so they're going to use cocaine. Then what? Yeah. They're into an expensive addiction.
One other thing too, Patty,
sure.
is that when I was using cocaine, I could hide it from my best friend. He'd never know.
Yep.
He'd never know I was doing cocaine. But if I smoked a joint of marijuana, he'd say, "You're stoned." That's
right. You're right.
You know? So I could go. You could be working using cocaine, and if you're not being tested in your work, they'll never know. But if I smoke marijuana, first thing I can smell marijuana of you, and you look stoned. You know, but one of my friends said to me one time, "How does your buddy keep it from his wife that he's doing cocaine?" And I said, "Well, he said she got to know." I said, "She doesn't have a clue." But if he went in the house and we just smoked marijuana in the shed, she'd know immediately. You know, it's such a hidden drug. And I met people when I was in that world. I met people that were criminal. They'd go and steal the money from your change in your car if they needed it. In my case, if I didn't have the money, I just didn't have it. And that was it. But it's like a hockey team. You got good and bad players on it. You know, and I just think that it's so out of control. And I've lost so many, and I call them friends because I met them in the drug world. And these people some of them had doctorate degrees. You know, they're not people that are just criminals. They're not all criminal. There are some. But, you know, it's just society has labeling people. You know, you see this guy, he's out on the side of the street and he's begging for money. Okay, if he is genuinely in trouble and needing money, well, he should get whatever help he needs. But if it's because of drugs, he needs more help than just money.
You're 100% right. Yeah, it's a complicated issue that we kind of gloss over, and we treat everyone in the throes of addictions as some sort of dreg of society. When, look, I have a buddy of mine, married, educated, good job, children. Next thing you know, lost the wife, lost the kids, lost his job. He's on the verge of losing his life. And he was an upper crust, you know, responsible professional. And then it went sideways, and it went sideways fast. It breaks my heart.
It did for me.
Sean, listen, I'm glad you're doing better, and I'm glad you called this morning.
Thanks, Patty, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Anytime.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. All right, let's get a break in. Do not go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to the re-elected member of the House of Assembly in St. Mary's. Oh, my God, I showed it. Placentia St. Mary's. That's Sherry Gammon-Walsh. Good morning, Sherry. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. I actually say Placentia St. Mary's and Trinity South. So when the time comes for the review, I am going to be heavily advocating that Trinity South be added to the name of this district if it remains as it is. Because I have over 3,000 people, probably close to 4,000 in Trinity South, and their name is not included in the district.
Point taken, but I wish you guys would knock it off because it's hard enough to remember the districts as they are.
I hear you, I know, but you know what? Back in 2015, when this happened, when they realigned the districts and changed the names, I mean, I spoke out in Whitburn that day. I wasn't elected, and I said, like, how can you just call it Placentia St. Mary's when you're adding all these people from Blaketown to Greens Harbour, and you're not calling it Trinity South? Like, really? Like, and I'll tell you, I felt that over the last 10 years. The people in Trinity South do not feel included because I'm saying I'm Placentia St. Mary's. Well, I'm actually Placentia St. Mary's Trinity South. And, you know, that's a fact. And they really feel excluded. And they've brought that up to me numerous times over the last 10 years. And to the point that even when I speak, like sometimes in the House of Assembly, I'd say Placentia St. Mary's, and then I'd pause, and Trinity South. But anyway, that's the fact, and that they do feel excluded from the district because of the name.
Okay.
I was listening. My past hat came on as I was listening to you here this morning. I heard Sarah on advocating for her child who's in school, and it just brought me back. Honest to God, my son is 29 years old now, and I entered politics advocating for persons with disabilities and inclusive education. And and you said something here about inclusion, and it's not inclusion at all costs. By no means, it's not. And it really brought me back, and I could hear in her voice, and I just could feel the anguish that she's going through, trying to get the proper education for a child. I had to give up work. My son was there, but I had a fabulous school, and he did well, and he's doing well today. But it took me having to give up a part of my salary to ensure that I was there every time they called, or every time they needed me to go to the school. It's really, really hard, families, and there's a lot more children today that have diagnoses of autism spectrum and other disabilities in the school system. So I could really feel it in her voice. And I know when I went into politics in 2015, I went in advocating for persons with disabilities, and we have made some strides. Like we have the Accessibility Act now, and we had accessible parking for blue zones and stuff, but there's so much more that needs to be done. There really is. And I've been 10 years in there doing that.
Well, as long as I've been doing this, all the way back to sitting on the couch on Out of the Fog, we've been talking about the same thing, and I've had the same perspective ever since. And I get why politicians or governments are loath to acknowledge, because there's a certain callousness that comes with saying inclusive doesn't work. Because being inclusive sounds like a very good thing. Conceptually speaking, it's an absolute appropriate path. But when things don't work, let's just not worry about the label. Let's just make things work. Because politicians in particular get caught up on the label. And the label is important when you're trying to sell yourself at the door. But in the pragmatic big scheme of things, it either works or it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? When I think about inclusion versus non-inclusion, I think about years and years ago when children with disabilities were isolated in a room in another part of the school and nobody knew they were there. That's not inclusion, right? That's not. And I mean, we were fighting to close the unit at the Waterford Hospital and to allow people into community, and that's where the fight started. And I guess there's just such aspiration, and there is a need to ensure that the resources and supports are there to include persons with disabilities. But you also got to each individual. It's individual supports, and that's really and truly what has to be examined, both by the families and by the school system and by society as a whole. But anyway, I called in today. That just hit me when I was listening to her, and I could just feel it in her voice, and it brought me right back to when I was that parent. Anyway, okay, I have to get off that subject. The House of Assembly. So, yeah, the official results are in, and for the first time in my 10-year career, I'm in opposition. So it's going to be interesting. But, and I wanted to speak to the people of Placentia, St. Mary's, and Trinity South, and I want to thank them for, putting their faith in me to continue on as their MHA. I have worked hard on their behalf over the last 10 years, and the district is really big. It's geographically big, and it's really hard to be at all these events and going 7 days a week. Some people, not all people, some people really don't understand what we as politicians do. And in rural Newfoundland, I'm telling you, we are really spread thin. There's so many. I have 14 volunteer fire departments, 9 schools, 54 communities. And I want to represent each and every one of them equitable. So I'm doing my best with charts, saying, where did I go last year? Where do I go this year? Where was I to the last time? I've been there too many times. I need to go to this community. It's constant. And it's 7 days a week, because a lot of these events happen on Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday afternoon, and then you're back to work on Mondays. Are wicked in the office. Monday and Tuesdays are the busiest days in the office. My constituency assistant, she's non-stop. And so, it's really busy. It's 7 days a week. And even when I took a holiday back in July. I had one scheduled for January, and it was buy local stuff going on. So I said, no way, I'm not going anywhere. I just can't. I just couldn't comfortably leave. So I stayed here, and then we took a holiday in July for 8 days, 7 nights. And I worked 2 hours every single morning in another country because I wanted to stay on top of it. You can't shut your computer down. You can't leave it. It's not possible. Everyone says to me, oh, Cheryl, turn off the computer, leave the phone home. You can't do it. You just cannot do it. People are relying on you. And with 54 communities, there's a lot of people. But we're in the official opposition, and I just want to let the people know that, we have projects going on in the district. We have a $12 million project going on in Dunville. That's going to continue. We have a sauce plant project that's almost done in St. Mary's, and it's taken me 10 years to arrive at this. And I know everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants it gone. We have a transportation infrastructure project happening in Riverhead. It's a little bit longer than what we anticipated. They ran into some snags along the way, but it's still going down there. And there's been some paving happening on the Cape Shore, which people will love to hear because, the Cape Shore is so beautiful and for tourism. And there was an add-on in Branch Country of almost 5 kilometers that has been awarded to a contractor. So, yes, it will be done when the contractor gets to doing it, but it has been awarded. So there's a lot of things going on. And right now we're in dissolution. So we don't get sworn in until probably after 31st of October. So, we're not sworn in. We're elect MHAs right now. I actually have to relinquish my laptop, I was told today. So there's a lot of things that, we have to do that people think that we're right into it and we have access to everything right away, but we don't. Now we're trying to. And I know all of us are trying our best to continue on as normal. But it's not that easy to continue on as normal when you don't have the resources to do it, and we don't have them right yet. But we will. We will. So that's kind of what I want to speak about today. Oh, one more thing.
Quickly.
I just want to talk about the 24-hour emergency in Whitburn. So the PC leader, now the premier-elect, I guess that's what he's, the leader of the PC party, was out in my district during the election and in Whitburn and really caused, ruffled a lot of feathers by saying, if you elect my candidate, when I'm elected, I'm going to open the emergency unit, the emergency wing in Whitburn 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Well, Patty, I guess he's going to have to use robots to do that because I know our government and health services have been advertising the positions for physicians for that 24-hour with nobody biting, nobody taking, nobody wanting the offer. No, we cannot find the physicians, the required number of physicians to work to open a 24-hour emergency. So we did open a urgent care, which is Monday to Friday, 9 to 4, and I was advocating for some more hours, some evening hours for that prior to the election. I'm waiting to see how he's going to open a 24-hour emergency in Whitburn and maintain the supports and services that are needed at the Placentia Hospital, where there's more resources, and at the same time in Whitburn. I have no idea how he's going to do that.
Well, I'm not so sure either, but there's questions that I'm happy to put to Premier Designate when we get a chance. Sherry, congratulations once again. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, Patty, and you have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye. Sherry Gamma-Walsh, re-elected in Placentia St. Mary's, Trinity South. Let's take a break. Charlie's here to talk about attracting doctors, reflection on the election, MOU, whatever you want to talk about. Welcome back. Let's go to line number 4. Charlie, you're on the air.
Hello, Patty. How you doing today?
Excellent today. Thank you. How about you?
Oh, pretty good, pretty good. It's a foggy all day, but that's it.
It is.
The issue I was thinking about the whole doctor issue. It's almost like that movie that they created. They should do where it was Deception. I can't remember the name of the movie. It was made here in Newfoundland where they played cricket.
The Grand Seduction.
Yes, that's it. There's not a lot of outdoor pursuits here in Newfoundland. I spent a bit of time in the mid-'80s down whitewater rafting down in New Zealand. And there's a school down there where anybody can apply to it. It's in Wanaka. It's Mount Aspiring or Aspiring College. And we don't have enough outdoor pursuits on the island. And I think that has led to a lot of mental health issues and that kind of thing. They should invest some money into it and look for good educators to promote outdoor pursuits on the island. They can't even find kayak guides here on the island.
Not like they once did, but there are still some, if you compare and contrast things like, let me pick something off the top of my head, the East Coast Trail. For hikers who look for, opportunities to pursue outdoor activity, East Coast Trail offers a pretty significant chance for a visitor who's of that mind. Adventure tourism, Labrador and otherwise. I think there are some, maybe not enough.
That's all good. That's all good, but doctors these days, they want their kids to be well educated. And sorry, our education system's not up to it. They want their kids to be, they don't have time to teach them practical things like homestead living, gardening, that kind of thing. They want their kids to learn this stuff. If they want their kids to play competitive sport, they're going to go to a big center. But in a rural community, in isolated places, in order to attract these educated doctors, nurses, and that, they got to have things for their kids. And this is where how much you don't need a new building. You just need to buy good equipment, good clothing, that kind of thing. It doesn't cost a lot. So why not put some money into that? And that will attract educated people to come here to Newfoundland, right? So that's just my take on that thing, for one thing. And also, we talked before about building schooners and that kind of thing. Things like that attract well-educated people that want to come and live here. Why isn't there more money put into that kind of thing? They should have been done 30 years ago. I worked in retail since I was a kid, and I worked the summer seasons, and I would travel in the winter. I was lucky I was introduced to the outdoor pursuits as a kid, and I traveled a bit around the world in the wintertime. And they should put more money into the outdoor pursuits, and that would attract, I think it would attract more doctors and nurses to the province.
Yeah, possibly. And look, I mean, there's no tale like retail. Also, you know what else attracts them? Opportunities for their siblings, or pardon me, their children. Opportunities for their partner, their spouse. Opportunities to be living in close proximity to amenities. The cost and the ease with which to get in and out of the province.
That's another issue about promoting homestead living on the coast of Newfoundland. Why isn't that promoted? I mean, our grandparents would be laughing at us with the technology that is out there today. You don't need to be connected to the grid. I mean, they built schooners with hand tools. Like, what's on the go? Like, let's promote it. That's how you get people to come here. But that's just my take on it.
And I'm glad you shared it this morning, Charlie. Thanks a lot. Anything else you want to add?
No, that's good. I just, it's not bad weather that keeps people out of the outdoors. It's bad clothes. That's all I can say.
You're a Mike Wall follower.
I don't know. I don't follow too much. I listen to you, Patty. Take it easy.
I appreciate the time, man. Have a nice weekend.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Something Dr. Mike Wall on the Wall Show here on VOCM says all the time, you know, weather is not anything that we should make an excuse for keeping us out of the great outdoors. It's not the weather, it's the clothes. All right, let's go. Line number 2. Jeff, you're on the air.
Hey there, how are you doing?
Excellent, you?
Not too bad, thanks.
Good.
Patty, well, first of all, I feel it's odd. I gotta say this, like I don't know you, so it feels odd to call you Patty, but that's your name.
Please do.
And but I thought of it like with your producer there just now, like it felt to me like when people are on like Jeopardy and they call Alex Trebek by his name, and I just find that odd. Anyway, I listened to I think his name was Tom Davis last Friday, talking about like a bunch of different things, and he mentioned that people in Labrador paying, I think he said 3.5 something cents a kilowatt hour or something for electricity, which I can't say with certainty, but I can tell you what I know, that or what I don't know. I don't know anyone that's paying $50 a month for heat and light.
Yeah, the Labrador Interconnected System generation charge is about 3.2 cents, but that's not the end result. And plus, not everyone's on the Labrador Interconnected System.
Okay, I wasn't certain about that because, I mean, well, I've been on kind of a self-imposed social media, like, vacation, for lack of a better word, since April. But like talking to friends and stuff on Facebook, like on the North Coast particularly, they saw their hydro bills go from like anywhere from $200 to $300 a month, to some of them as much as like almost $700 a month. and it's honestly, I don't know how some of them live like with that.
Yeah, and we also have to remember that there's a bunch of people in Labrador get their power from diesel generation stations. You know, even when the plant burnt down up in Charlottetown, we didn't do anything about it except rebuild another diesel generator. So it's strange, anyway.
Yeah, and I'd like to pose a question, if you don't mind, before I go.
Okay.
With regards to like the whole situation with Canada, the USA right now, and I'm coming at this from someone that's always just said on when it comes to anything particularly political, things just happen, and I sit on the wayside and okay, so that's new. But does realistically our Prime Minister have any impact or say when it comes to provinces or premiers taking their issues out and calling on him or putting it on him or her? That
do you mean things really like being able to flow power and pipelines across the country without the provinces having their own authority to make their own decisions? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Sort of that, but when maybe Premier of Alberta or Ontario point towards the Prime Minister as how come you're not getting us a better trade deal or something is that entirely on the Prime Minister, or is that a more an industrial up to the companies or the bit
No, that would be a political negotiation, but we're also talking about negotiating with someone in bad faith who's unpredictable and has very little basis for this newly instigated tariff-based trade war. We had a deal, he blew it up, pretended that it was about national security, and so I suppose the unpredictability is a big part of this. Will the Prime Minister ever be able to secure a better deal than we currently have? I hope so. Am I optimistic? Not really. But Jeff, anything else quick before I have to get to the newscast?
No, that's everything, man. I just wondered, is it fair or valid to put everything on the Prime Minister when I'm not sure if it is.
Well, as they say, the buck has to stop somewhere, and in this country, in political negotiations, especially international diplomacy, it does stop at the Prime Minister's desk. Whether or not that's 100% fair, that's where it stops, always will, regardless of what party lapel pin one is sporting. Jeff, I'm off to the news, but I appreciate your time this morning.
All right, thank you too, Paddy. Take care.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Yeah. All right, let's get to that newscast. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to the top of the board. Line number 1. Mike, you're on the air.
Yes, good morning, Paddy.
Good morning.
I just heard you talking about the MOU, and I have some concerns that I'd just like to bring out.
Sure.
I guess we all understand that Mr. Wakeham just got elected and the new government in, and they had to be given a bit of time with regards to the understanding the full impact of the MOU. And that's fine. And but we can't take our time on this. We don't have 2 years to discuss this and then come back to the people to let us know whether it's a good deal or bad deal. Because most people in Newfoundland and Labrador, we don't care about all the detailed financial side of it. We have to know, yes or no, is it a good deal? And to do that, we had to get moving on it. And I understand, like I said, that they need a bit of time. But I have some concerns, and I understand Mr. Wakeham's independent review. That is fine to have an independent review. Got no problem with it. But I do have some concerns. It's no good saying that. When is it going to be set up? That's number one. Number two is who is going to be on that independent review board. Like, we had to know that. 6 months down the road is no good. Hydro are negotiating in present day, you know, and I think whoever Mr. Wakeham has as an independent review, they had to sit down with NL Hydro and understand fully the MOU. And I'm not hearing anything on that at all. And the people have a right to know. They had to know, is it a good deal or a bad deal? You know, we have, and I'll say this to all the political parties, we just put 40 members in government. We put them there for a reason. We put them to represent us. So I would expect for that 40 members to come out in a unified way and agree or disagree with the independent review, yes or no. Not this bickering back and forth. I got no time for that. That's what we elected them for. We didn't elect them to turn the tide back on the individual person in Newfoundland, Labrador, who really don't fully understand the implementation of the dollar value, yes, whether it's good or bad for the province of Newfoundland. So, my final thing is I would expect from the existing government and their members on a weekly basis to come out with an update. Not to lead this now, because I see what's happening. This is going to be left for 6 months, and then someone's going to come out, we got this guy on, we got this guy on. Like, they had that independent review has to be established now. And they had to sit down with the hydro team and anyway, and for the government to have their, for the premier and his minister, a couple of ministers, whoever is going to be involved, set up to sit down with those people also and understand it. And the members, those other 40 people, we're expecting them to get a full review from NL Hydro and the independent people. They are the people we elected to help us make decisions, not for to put it back on us and say, well, we're going to have a referendum on this now. We're paying ye and ye represent us, and ye can come back to us whether you vote yay or you want to vote yay or nay on it, and then you can have a discussion with your people in your district.
Sure. I mean, for starters, I got no problem with independent review, given Justice LeBlanc was really quite clear on that recommendation, which I think is a good safeguard. It's the timing of it all here now. And if this is just more political appointees as individuals to conduct said oversight, that's not going to work. I mean, if we pick an entity, I just brainstorm or just pick a big organization, Rothschild or whoever, to have a look at it. Well, it's a timing issue. Like, when? What are we asking? What's the timeline for said report to be back in the hands? How's that going to work? Are we still going to have this binding referendum? I mean, all of those things that we don't really know. It's just the pretty vague, pump the brakes, independent review, then a referendum. Like, give me some timelines just to consider, and then we can add that to the conversation, because currently we don't have a whole lot beyond that. From Mr. Wakeham.
Exactly, Patty. That's right where I'm coming from. And I expect, like, they ran for 2 or 3 months, and they brought it. This independent review has been brought up for months and months. I expect somebody, Mr. Wakeham or his government, or somebody has someone in mind who they would like to see on this independent review board. So let's hear who they are. I don't want to see the same team who did the review for Hydro, and I don't want to hear the same names, the 8 or 10 names who came out against the review, because that's not an independent review then. An independent review is an independent review, and I have not heard. I expect Mr. Wakeham to come out with a schedule, because, like I said, we don't have 6 months or a year to the people. The people have to know, is it a good deal or is it a bad deal? And I expect the present government with the 40 members to guide the people of this province to show us the way, what they think is the way. And you know, if the people don't agree with that, you needn't worry. They'll hear from the people. The people will speak up. So, you know, the timeline to me is everything, and I'm not hearing nothing on the timeline.
Yeah, and we've got to get that timeline sooner than later. I understand the transition and getting the cabinet in place and, you know, giving further thought to some more specifics and details. But time is important here, and I know Tony Wakeham knows that. So hopefully now, maybe even as early as next week, we'll have our first opportunity to speak with him as the duly and newly Premier designate. Mike, I appreciate you making time for the show. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Paddy.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. And if people want to speak up about whatever, including the MOU and timing and points that Mike made, 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. We're taking a break, and then we're coming back. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 5. John, you're on the air.
Hey, good morning, Paddy.
Good morning.
Happy Friday, but I'm awake now. Your buddy called me there this morning. I'm up here in Ontario. I guess I called last week and I didn't call back. He called and woke me up.
Apologies.
Anyway, I got me jabbing in me. Now I'm awake. So just thanks to you and your buddy and all the crew and the OCM Open Line. God love the program. It's the voice of Newfoundland and Labrador. That's what I call you.
Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Listen, I just want to say congratulations to the Tory party for forming the majority government in Newfoundland and Labrador. And in particular, I want to say thank you to the people in the ridings that swung them into power, because they were looking for honesty just like I was, because I've been calling your program since last year when Fury and company started meeting up with Legault and company and decided to bring out this MOU. And I called in and I told you straight up, there should be full disclosure. The general public should want to know what's in this MOU. And he didn't cough up nothing. And I also told you that my dad worked at Churchill Falls for 15 years as a pipe fitter, and he was proud of every task that he performed at that resource. But he certainly was not proud of the fact that his children and his grandchildren did not benefit not one dime from that resource. And Fury and company didn't listen. They did not disclose to the public what they were doing. And the people in those ridings that voted PC and swung them, God love every one of you, because now we're going to get full disclosure and we're going to know what's in this thing for the future generations. I'm delighted. I really am.
The question I would have is, are we going to learn much more than we already know, regardless of who's in government? That would be my question. And I think the only opportunity to really know everything we need to know is when there's actual definitive agreements and they're in front of the respective leaders and utilities and they're about to sign them. We need those contracts to be in the House of Assembly so that we can have a fulsome debate about them, and we can bring all of these folks who were under sworn evidence offerings there just after the MOU was signed, bring them back in so we can ask them questions and get it on the public record so that we can glean as much information as humanly possible. But right now, we're kind of got the cart a little bit in front of the horse, given the fact we got something non-binding that doesn't have all the real detailed information that we desperately need to know whether or not we're on the right track.
Absolutely, and that's why I'm calling back, and that's why I'm delighted that the Tories won the election. Because I mean, let's be honest. The Liberals are basically saying it themselves. This thing bit them in the ass because they did not disclose to the public. They were not being honest with the general public, the population of Newfoundland and Labrador that voted them into power for the last 10 years. They were not being honest with them at all, and it bit them. And I'm delighted because now we're going to get honesty. I mean, it's just ridiculous that this government could think that, hey, listen, we got your back again. After 50 years of a boondoggle and a Liberal government back years ago, they said, hey, we got your back, but we got nothing out of it. Nothing out of it. I mean, I live in Ontario. I spent 35 years of my life here in Ontario. Worked, and I'm retired. A retired ex-Newfoundlander with a daughter of my own, 3 grandchildren of my own, that should be living in Newfoundland. I should have never had to move here because of the boondoggles of the past. And now this Liberal government goes and says, oh, don't worry about it. We got this stuff. Like, no worries. We don't need to disclose. No, I'm sorry. That's not the case whatsoever, and it bit them right in the butt. And I'm delighted that the Tories are going to bring this thing out so people can see it and vote on it. And it's important. Like your last caller was talking about expectations about disagreement. I say, what's the rush now, boys? I mean, we've been waiting 50 years. If we got to wait till 2041, then let's make them wait. Then we'll take it out. What's the rush, boys?
But we don't get it all in 2041, which is a pretty base misunderstanding out there. The only question I would ask about 41 is, what do we think we actually get in 2041? And I've said this many times. The government put forward a committee to look at exactly what 2041 means. They did their work, but they wouldn't tell us what they found. So consequently, there's people out there think that in 2041 we own 100% of the Upper Churchill, but it's simply not true. So that was really getting off on the wrong foot there. And I don't know what swayed the election necessarily, but you wonder how different things might have been for the Liberals if after the announcement of the MOU being signed, that they immediately went for what people would be more accepting of as a independent overview or review of it. It might have changed a lot of things for the Liberals, but they didn't do it, and it came back to bite them, to use your words.
You got that right, Paddy. They were being dishonest. I mean, let's be honest here. You're talking about a government that's been in power for 10 years. What expectations did we have out of them to do anything in the last 10 years? I mean, they brought in carbon taxes. They brought in sugar taxes. They voted to rob the public purse. They pay themselves on the way out the door.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I mean, why would you vote for it? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. But now we're going to get full disclosure. And the future generations of Newfoundland and Labrador, please God, will benefit this. And they won't be talking to you from Ontario with 3 grandchildren and a daughter that lives in Ontario that are Ontarians that should be Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. You know what I mean? That's my point. It's just ridiculous. But anyways, I'm just hopefully this disclosure comes forward so we can see the benefits of this for the generations that are to come, because they will benefit from it, and they won't be talking to you from Ontario like I am. And I just want to make one more point here before I go, because I called Tony Wakeham's office and I called Jim Dinn's office, because this thing with the hydro, at some point it's going to come around. Okay. Now, in the province of Quebec, they benefited from the hydro for a long, long time. And they actually got their own pension plan, as you know, right? So this stream, when it actually does start, the benefits, hopefully, at least 80% of it will flow to the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. Like I said to Wakeham and Dinn, Newfoundland and Labrador needs to set up a pension plan for the people, the future generations of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, a stream of funds that's going to come from Churchill Falls needs to go right into a Newfoundland and Labrador pension plan. It needs to be set in play for them, because it'll pay in spades and then some. And I truly believe that.
John, appreciate the time this morning. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, Patty.
Okay, buddy.
Have yourself a good day.
You too, man. Bye-bye. Look, let's just play hypotheticals. If anything comes to pass, this deal, a better deal, whatever. I mean, people talk about the rights paid in Quebec versus rights paid here. I understand that because I'm a right payer. But that's all going to be a political decision, right? As to how any money coming in the door gets earmarked for whatever purpose. And everyone will have their own opinion. Some will say, well, we spend it on healthcare or put it in the future fund or whatever. For me, if it's not spent on debt and controlling my power rights, then I think we've missed the boat. Just personal opinion. Let's take a break for the newscast. When we come back, Jeff's there to talk about the concept of inclusive education. Patrice Gordon, a steering committee member with Childcare Now NL. Jim wants to talk about the referendum, and then whatever you want to talk about. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of the Wellness and Healthy Lifestyle Show with Dr. Mike Wall. Listen live Thursday nights at 7 p.m. and Sundays at 4 p.m.
Welcome back. Let's go to line number 6. Jim, you're on the air.
Hey, Patty, how's it going?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
I'm not bad. So the referendum I wanted to talk about, and I wanted to talk about ceasefire in Gaza too, is not the current one on the MOU, but the referendums on Confederation in 1948. And I wanted to tie together the two because we have a history of using referendums and expressing our political will in this province. You know, we had the denominational referendums, the 2 referendums on Confederation, now the one on the MOU. And but I'll start with the Gaza ceasefire because it's only a start there's not going to be a lasting peace there without justice, and that justice is a Palestinian state run by Palestinians, not controlled from outside. The ceasefire is already being broken by Israel in a really bad faith manner, because they're saying that Hamas is breaking the ceasefire by not returning the dead bodies of hostages that are buried under rubble. Now, let's get this straight. Israel killed those Israeli hostages. If they're buried under rubble, they were killed by bombs or missiles or tank fire. So given that the text of the ceasefire is that Hamas will put every effort in to bring the dead hostages back, it's acting in bad faith for Israel to say they're breaking it by not being able to excavate people when they've got no excavators. And these are people, of course, that Israel killed themselves. And they're breaking the ceasefire by cutting the aid that they promised and are required to send into Gaza 600 trucks a day to half, 300 trucks a day. Now, 600 trucks a day is bare minimum food for people that's starving, right? 300 trucks a day. They have no authority to do this under the ceasefire. They're breaking it unilaterally. But the reason that this is so concerning is because they've broken all the past ceasefires. If we think about the one earlier this year, January to March, the violation and the aftermath of that has been horrendous. Israel violated that ceasefire on the night of March 18 by massacring 400 Palestinian civilians and then resuming their invasion of Gaza. And what they did right after that is they cut the aid from that level to 60% of what Palestinians needed, bare minimum, for the next month and the month after. And then the month after that, they cut it down to 30% and then nothing. Right? How would you eat if someone stole 70% of your groceries before you even got home? You can't, right? They're using starvation as a weapon of war. They're using these ceasefires to repair their public image, and they've been doing this since 1948. Israel has broken every ceasefire that they have concluded with another party since 48. They broke ceasefire in 49, 67, 73. They broke it again in 81 and 82. Broke ceasefire 88. They broke them 4 times in 2001, 2002, again in 2008, and another 3 times in 2011, 2012, and there's been a handful since then, including the one earlier this year. So we need to remain vigilant because Israel is going to try to break this ceasefire. Again, they already have, and I'm very concerned that this will not last while the world looks on to other things. So 1948, to bring back to the referendum, is a significant year because in Palestine, what happened then was it's known as the Nakba, and that 700,000 people were driven from their homes, many people killed, and now today it's happening still. 2 million people in Gaza have been displaced. There were only 2.2 million people in Gaza at the start of the war, and nearly 100,000 people have been killed, right? But Palestine has been occupied for longer than the state of Israel, and in fact, in 1948, we were both under the rule, Newfoundland and Palestine, of an unelected foreign power, and the same foreign power, Great Britain. But there were differences between the two of them. In Newfoundland, we got a referendum, and we were able to choose our future. Now, we might have had a second referendum because people didn't get the result they wanted in Canada and Great Britain. They might have meddled in the vote, and it might have only been 51 to 49. And if I was there at the time, I might have voted against Confederation. But we had a choice. And in 1948, in Palestine, Britain, instead of letting them have their freedom, they allowed another genocide to begin 3 years after the Holocaust by some of the very people who were victimized by it. And that's obscene. And I asked myself, why? Like, what's the reason we got our freedom and they did not? The only reason I can see is we look like British people. We're white and Palestinians aren't. But regardless of why it happened the way it did, we got our freedom to choose our destiny, and we did choose it. Palestine did not, and that's wrong. And because I don't think, seeing the history, there can be any lasting peace without justice. We need a Palestinian state now, and we can't let Israel oversee or control it. They've got a history of breaking ceasefires, using famine as a weapon of war, and the statements of their government ministers expressing genocidal intent. If you look up quotations by Itamar Ben-Gvir, National Security Minister, or Bezalel Smotrich, their Finance Minister, Israel Katz, their Defense Minister, or their Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, They're saying things that dehumanize the Palestinians and openly express that they will continue this as a war of annihilation. They will not stop until there is no Palestine, and we cannot let that happen. We can't trust Israel to have any kind of oversight or control over the future Palestinian state.
Okay.
But we also can't let the world step in and impose it. Can you give me just a moment and I'll let you step in? Or do you want to ask a question? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I just want to say, because it's a bit concerning now with Donald Trump and his Peace 2025 and his flashy ceremonies. But it seems like instead of the Palestinians getting to choose their own destiny, it's the world stepping in and imposing one on them. And that's not self-determination. That's not right when you have people like Tony Blair. Now, this is the guy who, along with George W. Bush, went in and invaded Iraq and made it a hellhole for a decade more since. That man has no credibility in a peace process. That man has no credibility in the Middle East. It needs to be local Palestinian leaders that do construct this new state. Now, I might personally, coming around to a one-state solution, I don't think Israel can be allowed to exist in the same way that Nazi Germany couldn't be allowed to exist after the Second World War. A Palestinian state from the river to the sea. And that's not a Hamas slogan. From the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea is the historical homeland of the Palestinian people. It's the current homeland of the Palestinian people, and it'll be the future homeland of the Palestinian people. But like, that's up in the air right now. And if people like Mark Carney or Keir Starmer or Emmanuel Macron have sincere hopes for a two-state solution, they need to pressure Israel to release Marwan Barghouti now, because he's the most popular Palestinian leader by a long shot, and he is one of the very few who still think that a two-state solution is possible. Now, this man was beaten to within an inch of his life a month ago, and it's a question of whether he's still alive. But if he's been in prison for political reasons for decades, and he's never even seen his own grandchildren. So I think the window for a two-state solution is rapidly closing. You've got Israel on one side, and you've got the people standing with Palestine on the other. So if these world leaders, these technocrats, these experts, so-called experts, think that a two-state solution can be had, you need to pressure Israel to let out the people who are actually in favor of that, who have credibility with the Palestinian people, to actually propose that and not impose it on them. That's not justice. Now, Paddy, what were you going to say?
Hard to know where to start now, but a couple of things. Point taken regarding how people died that are buried under rubble, even though we don't really know when everybody died as hostages.
That's true.
I'll add that to it. Secondly, an actual ceasefire does indeed not only talk about things like the return of hostages, and that goes both ways. It also requires Hamas to actually agree to lay down their arms while we try to figure this out. And you're talking about Israeli rule of what we refer to as the Gaza Strip or some of the things that go on the West Bank, which we don't talk about, which is remarkable to me. But anyways, the control of that particular piece of land and the people living on is more likely than not going to be under Israeli rule. It's going to be under American rule, which is, there's a distinct overlap there anyway, but I think that's a distinction worth making here now, because when we hear from people who say they've been behind brokering this particular ceasefire, lasting peace is utopia, which has never come true. It's only in storybooks, but we're talking about it like it's just a real estate transaction, which really is devoid of humanity, is devoid of what's happened, not since October the 7th, is devoid of what's happened since the middle 40s. So when we talk about it like that, then of course, pragmatic long-term peace is compromised because words matter. They just do. And it doesn't matter what side of this you're on. Words absolutely matter, and they always will, and there's a reason for it. Just because of the time, I'm going to leave it there very quickly, but I'll give you the floor for the final thought.
Well, thanks, Paddy. I think you're absolutely right that we ought to humanize this discussion a lot more than treating it like a transaction. A lot of people in Newfoundland felt the effects of the Placentia Bay resettlement in the mid-1960s, and that was people who had services taken away from them, pitted against each other, members of their own community, and eventually forced from their homes. But what's going on in Gaza right now, is still going on, is that, plus the house is bombed, plus half your family's killed. So perhaps we can draw on some of our shared experiences as Newfoundlanders and Labradorians to display a bit of empathy to the situation. Thanks, Paddy.
I guess losing services is different than life, but I get your point and the analogy. Thanks for the time, Jim.
Plus the rubble, plus the death.
I understand. Appreciate this. Have a nice weekend.
You too, Paddy.
Thank you. Bye-bye. All right, final break of the morning and the week. When we come back, it's inclusive education, and I assume we're talking childcare. Don't go away. Welcome back. Let's get a couple in before we're out of time. Starting with line number 3. Jeff, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you this morning?
I'm very well, thank you. How about you?
I'm doing well, Paddy. First of all, I'd like to identify with Sarah, who called earlier in the show. Like her, I am the parent of a student with autism who has very high needs. I'd like to say that where I'm from, in the Marystown Buren area, that the instructional resource teachers and the student assistants are doing great work working with the children down here who have pervasive needs. Given their situation and the resources that they have at their disposal, they're doing great work. But like you alluded to in your conversation with Sarah, the model that they're working in is just not benefiting the children like it should be.
Agreed. I think that's as plain as the nose on your face. It really is, and that's really unfortunate.
Yeah. I feel, Paddy, that, here we are struggling about trying to get what's best for these children. I'm also a retired educator, and I think sometimes the solution is obvious. We live in an age of technology. We need to look nationally and globally to see what's working. There's no need to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. Find what's working, and act on it. Resource it like we need to, because, then we can have these children who have pervasive needs, like my child and Sarah's child, can reach their full potential,
Yeah. I mean, just even incremental steps that brought us to where we are. Even if you just point to something like the School for the Deaf. They closed it, moved deaf children who would have gone to that school, which is only predominantly people living in this part of the island, put them into the K-12 system, and then what do we have? We have things like human rights challenges for young Carter Churchill. We've had other people who don't have the time or the want to go through that process who send me private emails saying, please don't disclose my name, but my hard of hearing or profoundly deaf child is being left behind in full, sitting there at their desk in complete silence all day with no one who speaks their language, and we're pretending that we're doing a good service to that child, to that family, to the rest of the classroom. It's not working.
No, Paddy, and I know you're getting up against the clock there now, so I'll just end with this type of statement. I feel within the system, because I have been in it for 30 years, there are educators who know what would work, but yet they're in the trenches, and they're still employees of the district or the Department of Education. But to add, I think really inclusion as is happening now for my intellectually disabled son is exclusion, really, when it comes to his education and preparing him, if you look at the totality of what he needs to know to be prepared for life.
And that's what we owe your child and every child, regardless of their life circumstance and or disability or exceptionalities. It's just the basics of what we're trying to achieve, and we owe it to you and everybody else. Jeff, really appreciate your time. Thanks for doing it today, and I hope you have a nice weekend.
You as well, Paddy. All the best.
You too, pal. Bye-bye. Final thoughts this morning. Oh, sorry, that was a bit quick. Final thoughts this morning, line number 4. Say good morning to one of the steering committee members at Childcare Now NL. That's Patrice Gordon. Patrice, you're on the air.
Hi, good morning, Patty, and good morning to your listeners.
The same to you. Welcome to the show.
I just wanted to talk to you. First of all, I want to commend your listeners, your callers who have been on the air this morning talking about childcare, talking about education, and just to say that we have the same problems in childcare, and I'm appalled at the level of the gentleman just said exclusion. And the PC government has in the platform as a heading setting children and youth up for success. And I want the nation, I want the province to hold them accountable and to just implore and work with them in getting this, in recognizing, and I want parents especially to raise their voices. I'm happy that people have been calling in this morning, and this is the way we need to speak up about it, about the things that are lacking in the education system, about childcare that is going to set us up for success and the educational system which is lacking. There's legislation in childcare. There are legislations in childcare that are as old as 1989, which need to be reviewed. And the previous caller was talking about something like that in education as well, in the K-12. These are the things that we want the PC government to look at. We want to have meaningful dialogue with them as Childcare Now, Newfoundland and Labrador. And we want to encourage them to, they have in their platform also the $10 a day childcare, that they support $10 a day childcare. We want them to keep that top of mind. We want them to extend it. We want them to just look at the system that's $10 a day. And they're encouraging support for early childhood educators, which is also something that Childcare Now and Newfoundland and Labrador has been advocating for. Pensions and paid sick days, and we're happy that they have it in their platform.
Yeah, I don't see a legitimate argument against having early childhood educators treated and paid, and the benefits associated with educators in the pre-K to 12 system. I mean, if we're talking about the formative years of brain development, the formative years of socialization, how could we not treat them, if not exactly the same, but very, very similar, including the benefits package they deserve? If 90% of my brain is developed by the time I'm age 5, don't we think that early childhood educators need to be appropriately trained, appropriately paid, recruited and retained the same way we talk about teachers in the system?
And I want to thank you for that, Patty, because you're always, whenever I speak to you, that's always your point, and I'm happy that you speak on behalf of us, on behalf of early childhood educators, because it's true. If the children aren't set up in the early phases, when they get to K-12, they're not ready for K-12. So even K-12 depends on the early childhood sector.
It does. I mean, the documentation is there. Even if we just use pre-K, and not to take away from child care and early childhood education, but pre-K, if you look at comparative scores, median scores across grade 3, grade 6, grade 9, grade 12, pre-K has made a difference. So let's treat pre-K like we would from being a toddler and socializing and learning skills and reading and sharing and all those fundamentals. We set people up for success. So to me, regardless of your political leanings, setting young people up for success into their formative years through elementary or primary, elementary, junior and high, why isn't that a good idea? To me, it sounds like the base minimum we could be doing.
Very minimum. And we want to, as I said before, we want to have meaningful dialogue with whatever government. But we've had challenges with the previous government, and we want to make sure that the PC platform also speaks about a panel that we want to set up. We want to encourage them to use the resources that are here. There are early childhood educators here that have been in the system for decades, and we know the system inside out. And the policies that need to be changed, we need to speak about that. And they have the resources here and the people that live in the province. Childcare Now, Newfoundland and Labrador, we're experts in policies. We're experts in the system, and we want to be sitting at that table. Jimmy Pratt Foundation, they do a lot of research. They do a lot of work in childcare also. So we want to be at that table.
And you should be. Patrice, you've had the last word. I always appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patty. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye. Patrice Gordon, one of the steering committee members at Childcare Now NL. Good show today, good shows all week. Big thanks to all hands. We will indeed pick up this conversation again on Monday morning, right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy weekend. Talk Monday. Bye-bye.